Welcome back to another edition of the MMA Pick'ems podcast. And man, what a card we're coming off of here. It had the full spread. I mean, we got early knockouts, snooze fests, 3 round wars, controversial decisions, knockouts, submissions, and not one, but 2 no contests. I'm not sure if I'm missing anything here, but it looks like everything's been covered in terms of, the outcomes for that, for these fights. But taking a look at how I did here, I went 6-4-2 on the picks and did come out with a 1.98 unit profit on the night. That's right, I am slowly and unceremoniously digging my way out of this hole that I put myself in to begin the year. But before I get any deeper into this recap, I do want to give a shout out to everyone who has subscribed and has been watching these videos. I really do appreciate it. I know I haven't really been marketing or promoting my channel at all, but maybe I'll start, begging for some likes and subscribes. Who knows? But yeah, there are a lot of great cappers out there, and the fact that you guys are tuning in to listen to what I have to say, it really, really warms my heart. But in all seriousness, I do really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. But enough with all that sappy shit. Let's get right into these recaps. And speaking of, let me know what you guys think about some of these recaps, whether or not I should just shorten them up or go a little bit deeper into them, because I feel like sometimes I ramble a little bit too much on some of these picks. And on some of these cards, I go a little heavy on with certain picks, so it might drag on a little bit. So let me know what you guys think. But yeah, diving right into it, let's take a look at some of these props that I placed. Right, so Jinyu Fry versus Glory to Paula. I did take Paula to win inside the distance. The reasoning for that was I felt that Fry was a bit slow, a bit plotty, and does tend to gas, but I guess that's the price you pay for having pound for pound best physique in women's MMA. All that muscle makes her a bit slow and drains on her cardio a bit. I just thought that DePaula might have a shot at landing clean and possibly getting her out of there inside the distance. Obviously, DePaula is still pretty low level, which is why I only put a quarter of a unit there. And then for one of the other props, I took Rodriguez to win inside or by a KO against Rani Yaya. Obviously, didn't really pan out there. I just wanted to look to fade Yaya there. I felt that maybe his cardio was starting to taper off. But again, Rodriguez, pretty low level opponent. Yaya was able to get in there, get it done, was able to just kind of grind him out for a little bit. And again, I wasn't super confident in that, which is why I only put like a quarter of a unit on Rodriguez. And on to the next ones, I did pick Haqparast and Angela Hill to win by a knockout. I just felt for both of those fights that if there were a large enough skill gap between the opponents that, a KO is live, but Garcia showed a lot of heart in there, a lot of toughness, kept his guard tight even though some of Haqparast's shots were getting through, but for someone coming in on short notice, he gave a pretty good account of himself. And then for the Hill versus Yoder fight, I think there were a few moments where Hill probably could have gotten Yoder out of there, but it looks like she overextended and Yoder was able to take the fight to the ground. But I don't think that was a terrible read or a terrible play. I think that if, Hill was a little more tighter with her combinations, she had a good chance of getting Yoder out of there. I mean, she had Yoder completely outclassed on the feet. And then lastly, Ryan Spann by KO. And, I know I did pick Cirkunov officially on the podcast last week, but it wasn't a super confident pick, and I felt that this fight could play a number of ways. One of them was definitely Spann by KO. I did end up pulling the trigger on the prop because the odds on that were pretty crazy. I mean, Spann by KO at plus 220, pretty nuts. And I felt that, for Spann, his most likely path to victory would be the knockout. Cirkunov is a bit older and is coming off of a somewhat lengthy layoff and is a bit submission or bust. So I ended up just putting a little bit on Spann, mainly because honestly the odds were pretty crazy at plus 220 there. And then lastly, I did hit on Semmelsberger by knockout. I did only put a quarter of a unit there because I was already playing Semmelsberger straight. I ended up putting 1.8 units on him. I was honestly ready to play him at minus 150, but it looked like a ton of love was coming in on Witt, so I kind of held back on the line a little bit and waited for the line to drop, and I didn't get all the love that was coming in for Witt. I mean, yeah, he had a good showing against an old and out-of-weight Cole Williams, but man, you can't really take much from that performance. Williams was just, it looked like he was coming off the couch, honestly. But yeah, Semmelsberger did work there, and I always knew that Witt was a bit chinny, but I mean, didn't realize it was that bad. But yeah, glad Semmelsberger got it done, and that's what kind of put me ahead. And on to the next one. Darren Stewart, Eric Anders. My God, that was the best Eric Anders has looked ever. He was doing work in there early, and I'm not saying that Stewart was going to lose that fight, but it would have been a really tough hill to climb. But I mean, who knows? Maybe Anders might have punched himself out a bit there. But yeah, that was a little dicey, and I'm okay with getting the push there. Honestly, did not expect Anders to look that fucking good right out the gate. And lastly, here I did put a little bit on Edwards by knockout and Muhammad moneyline. And unfortunate how the fight played out, but pre-fight I felt that Muhammad might have had a shot at possibly winning a decision if he kept the pressure on. I thought that the line was a little wide at the beginning, but as the week went on, I felt that it could potentially be one of those levels fights where Edwards is able to just completely outclass Muhammad. And in those scenarios, I do like playing the KO. And I think we got a little flash of it early when Edwards landed that head kick. I definitely think that if the fight kept going, over the course of 5 rounds, Edwards is going to be landing pretty clean on Muhammad, whether it's those elbows or even those head kicks. So I think that there's a good chance that prop might have cashed, but we'll never know. But yeah, that'll do it for this recap. So let's jump right into this card. I think we have 13 fights here. We have a pretty exciting card here, if I'm going to be honest, and plenty of opportunities here to make some money. So without further ado, let's get right into the breakdowns. Anthony Birchak versus Johnny Eduardo. And Eduardo is going to be the minus 125 favorite, and the comeback on Birchak is plus 105. And I'll be honest, I was ready to fade Eduardo here, but I don't know if Birchak is going to be the guy to do it. But let's take a look at Eduardo here. So he's got a Muay Thai base, as you could probably tell from that ugly-ass tattoo on his stomach. I mean, he's pretty low volume on the feet, really loads up on that right hand. It does look like he still have some power, and will look to counter those leg kicks. But I don't know how much this analysis really is going to matter, because Eduardo is 40 years old and is coming off of a 2.5-year layoff. I mean, this is red flags galore here for Eduardo. Like, aside from the long layoff and the age, it does seem like Eduardo has questionable fight IQ as well. I mean, in his most recent fight against Nathaniel Wood, and that was over like 2.5 years ago, he was actually doing pretty well in the first round, had Wood hurt there, and then went for an ill-advised takedown against Wood and got caught in a Darce choke. And then the fight before that, he was overcommitting on a heel hook and basically just ate like 20 punches to the face before finally getting the fight stopped from ground and pound. But yeah, I feel that Eduardo is primed for the fading here. It's just that, like I said before, I don't know if Birchak is the guy to do it. I mean, Birchak, he's a high-pressure fighter, really high output, likes to throw those leg kicks, but his striking is a bit wild, and he does leave his chin out there. And for someone like Birchak, that's very, very concerning, especially since I think he is a bit chinny as well. And you could tell the bookies don't really respect him at all. I mean, he's a slight underdog to a Johnny Eduardo who's coming off of a 2-fight lose streak, 2.5-year layoff, and is 40 years old. But taking a look at this matchup, I definitely do think that Birchak has the tools to win. He's the more active fighter on the feet. I think that if he is able to avoid a clean shot from Eduardo, he will be able to outpoint Eduardo. And, with how questionable Eduardo's fight IQ is, he could very well get the finish as well. But the way he leaves his chin out when he's thrown his combinations, the way he just throws naked leg kicks is very concerning, especially for someone like Eduardo who does hit heavy and is good at countering those leg kicks. That being said, though, Eduardo does tend to load up a bit on those shots. So, Birchak might be able to avoid it. It's just potentially the counters of Eduardo that might give Birchak some trouble. Honestly, I really want to fade Eduardo here, but plus 105 I don't think is juicy enough for Birchak. Although I definitely feel that he's going to be the value side. Honestly, I just don't think that either guy should be played at as a favorite. But as far as a pick goes, I'm going to go with Birchak. I don't think he's that good, but the long layoff and the age of Eduardo is a concern. I think that Birchak can be the more busy fighter. I think that if he is able to mix in a takedown, he could very well win this. Just drain Eduardo's gas tank. And being 40 at 135, I mean, the dude's basically a T-Rex for that division. Although he does seem to look like he's still in pretty good shape according to his IG. But yeah, I'm going to go with Birchak here for the pick. Very low confidence. And I think a prop that I might want to look at is Eduardo by knockout. I think that if I can get good enough odds on that, I might put maybe a quarter of a unit there. But honestly, if money comes in on either guy and I can get plus money on either fighter, I'll take it. Because at the end of the day, I think this is ultimately a pick'em fight. But yeah, gonna pick Birchak here. No bet so far. Might be looking at a few props, but let's see where the line moves. Bruno Silva versus JP Bays. And this is a very interesting matchup, mainly because I'm very interested to see how Bays does well, or how he does here. But taking a look at Bays, let's take a look at the betting lines here first. Bays is going to be the minus 200 favorite, and the comeback on Silva here is plus 175. Or actually, sorry, Bays is a minus 205 favorite, so slight difference there. Anyways, taking a look at Bays, on the feet, he has a pretty wild striking. Haven't seen too much from him, honestly, on the feet, but, that's because his wrestling is just really good, and he will go to it without fail. He's got really solid wrestling, really good timing and entries on his takedowns, great transitions, great top control, and really strong ground and pound. And we've really started to see his BJJ game develop a bit in his last fight against Jacob Silva, although that was a really weird stoppage where the referee, I believe it was Mark Goddard, who called the fight off, even though it looked like Silva didn't tap. He wasn't out. He was protesting that as soon as the stoppage happened. So a little weird there, but I mean, Bays was pretty much dominating that whole first round. And while I can't say that Bays was going to win, rounds 2 and round 3s for sure, I'm pretty sure he was on track to either winning a pretty dominant decision or potentially getting a stoppage later in the fight. But with that being said, though, I think that, Bays does look very promising. However, I still have some reservations with him. The first being his cardio, potentially. I mean, because back in his first stint on the Contender Series, he did lose to Joby Sanchez where, he had a pretty dominant first round, but it looked like he might have emptied the tank in that first round. Looked pretty tired in that second round, got clipped, and eventually got taken down and had a bit of ground and pound landed on him. Secondly, it looks like his striking hasn't really improved. I mean, he's still a bit wild on the feet, and with how quickly he wants to take the fight to the ground, his lack of striking, or his lack of having a plan B, is a bit concerning because he's been able to take all of his opponents down so far, but eventually he will run into someone that he can't take down, and when that happens, it's going to get a little dicey on the feet, especially with how wild he is. And from what I've seen, not very good defensively, and he did get wobbled by Sanchez a little bit, so the durability might be a concern too. But for the sake of this matchup, I'm gonna lean towards him being able to get the takedowns, although that is definitely a concern going forward. Taking a look at his opponent, Bruno Silva, so he's had a pretty unimpressive stint in the UFC so far. Granted, he has been facing some really tough opponents in Taha, Dvorak, and Ulanbekov. They didn't really do him any favors with the matchmaking, but he still hasn't looked that good. He's really light on the feet, has a switch stance attack. He's constantly moving in there. He does like to swing big, puts a lot of power in his shots, but because of that, he doesn't throw enough, and that tends to be the issue with a lot of guys who put a lot of power in their shots. A lot of the time, they're looking for that perfect shot to hit, or they're kind of pacing themselves a bit so they don't punch themselves out. He does throw a lot of feints, but doesn't really pull the trigger on a lot of them. Despite all his movement, he is a bit hittable. We have also seen Silva hit some offensive takedowns as well. So, he's pretty well-rounded. I think he's got a black belt in jiu-jitsu as well. But for the sake of this matchup, I'm going to assume that, Silva does have the better striking here just because I haven't really seen anything from Bays. And I'm going to have to give a pretty clear wrestling advantage to Bays. But as far as this matchup goes, I think Baze is going to be able to take it. I think that he will be able to implement his wrestling and likely, get a good amount of control time in there, lay that ground and pound, possibly get Silva out of there, early in that fight. But I'm not super confident. As good as Baze has looked in all of his performances, he's only been fighting pretty low level guys, and the cardio issues are definitely still a concern for me. And again, his lack of a plan B. If he isn't able to take Silva down to the ground, I don't know how he's going to fare on the feet. And honestly, there wasn't a ton of tape on Baze here. The only fights I was able to find was his Joby Sanchez, the Rodriguez, and the Silva fight for him. It does look like he has a fight that's gone halfway through the third round, and another fight that's gone pretty deep into the fourth round as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say that maybe his cardio issues have been shored up a bit. So cardio seems to check out now. The male pattern baldness starting to kick in. Little bit fishy here, but assuming the cardio checks out for him in this fight, I think that Silva is going to be in for a pretty rough night. So yeah, I'm going to have to go with Baze here for the pick. I think that he will be able to implement his wrestling and likely win a very dominant decision, maybe even get a finish in that first round. But from a betting perspective, I'm not sure if I want to play Baze here straight just yet. I think that even though, Silva is 10-5, he's been battle tested. He's fought some decent opponents in Taha, Dvorak, and Ulanbekov. So this will be a decent step up in competition for Baze. I do think he gets it done, but there are a few concerns for him that are preventing me from wanting to play him straight. Maybe look to put him in a parlay, but like I said before, the parlays haven't been doing me too good this year, so I might look to just avoid this fight. Although, man, I'm really enticed by the wrestling of Baze. I really do think that he gets it done. There just are certain red flags that are keeping me off, so I'm going to sit on this for a bit. I might end up pulling the trigger on him. I might not. But if I do, I'll be sure to post it on my Bet MMA tips page. But as of right now, I'm a little tentative. But I'll see. I'll do a little more research and then make my decision maybe later in the week. Julija Avila versus Julija Stoliarenko. And Avila is going to be the minus 375 favorite here, and the comeback on Stoliarenko is plus 300. And let's start with Avila here. She's a very aggressive fighter. She likes to back opponents down and really just unload on them. She's got good elbows and knees in the clinch as well, and we'll look to throw combinations, especially when she's got her opponents backed up to the cage. Her striking can get a bit wild, though, although, she does have quite a bit of pop in her punches and can definitely crack. What I have noticed with her, though, is she does tend to fight in bursts where, she'll throw like a pretty heavy combination and then kind of just slow down a little bit, maybe just throw like a kick or a jab. Very Yoel Romero-esque in the sense that she'll unload on a 4 or 5 punch combination and then kind of catch a bit of a breather before going off on another burst. But yeah, that tends to be how she fights, and she definitely is a finisher. She looks to finish in all of her shots. She's not landing just pitter-patter shots. She's not trying to outpoint opponents. She's trying to get them out of there. I have seen her struggle a bit up against the cage, and she definitely struggles off of her back a bit. We saw that in full display against Sijara Eubanks, where Eubanks was able to just completely outmuscle Avila, hold her up against the fence, and then take her down and just control her for long periods of time on the ground. So it seems like the blueprint might be out on Avila. Really just look to control her in the clinch, look to take her down, really just look to tie her up and really just mitigate the striking that she has. And taking a look at Julija Stoliarenko here, she is a armbar specialist. However, if you take a look at the record of her opponents that she's pulling this off on, they're extremely low level, and her record is extremely padded, and she's 9-4. So let that sink in a bit. But yeah, she is able to pull off those arm bars against very low level opponents, and as you start facing opponents that are a bit better, that are a bit more skilled, it becomes progressively harder. Although it definitely is still possible, but much harder to pull off. On the feet, she is pretty wild as well. I mean, we saw in that her fight against Lisa Rizosa, she came out with like a Superman punch, I think. She also does tend to wing some wild overhands, but Overall, I think that she's much more comfortable on the ground. That said, her wrestling isn't really good. And, I have seen her try and pull guard multiple times, which, I'm not really a fan of. So, yeah, I think Stoliarenko is pretty low level. I mean, she does have that dangerous armbar, but outside of that, I don't think that she's got much else. So, yeah, she's very wild, very unpolished, and extremely reliant on getting that armbar. But taking a look at this matchup, I think that Avila should be able to take it. I mean, on the feet, she's going to be the way more dangerous striker. I think in all of the fights I've seen, she's been able to hurt and rock her opponents. However, I just don't know what kind of game plan that Stoliarenko might come in with. If she's looking to stand and bang with Avila, she's most likely going to get put out. But, if she goes towards maybe more of a grapple-heavy game plan, look to tie up with Avila, look to tire her out a bit. She might have a shot in grinding out a decision, or maybe if she's able to get it to the ground, work that armbar that she has. But if she isn't able to get it to the ground, I think she's going to struggle quite a bit. I think that for as long as the fight stays standing, Avila will have a shot at ending this fight. But the money line is just way off here at minus 375. It's almost suggesting that Avila is going to win at 80%. And while I really do favor her here, Stoliarenko could potentially grind out a decision or even get that armbar she loves to throw. So yeah, I don't know if I want to touch this fight from a money line perspective. I don't know if I want to play the props either. I think inside the distance might be a good look, but I think the over-under might be set at 1.5, and it might be juiced to the under. The odds haven't come out for it yet, but I just have a feeling that might happen. I think there's a good chance that this doesn't see the scorecards, so that might be the play here, but it really just comes down to where they set the line. And, I wouldn't lay the chalk on the under if it is too juiced, since there is a possibility that Stoliarenko might actually come in with the game plan and just look to grind out Avila. But yeah, this fight is kind of dicey to bet on no matter what angle you're trying to take. But the lean here is Avila by knockout. And I'm going to wait for some of these props to come out first. Montel Jackson versus Jesse Strader. And what a weird fight this is, because it just feels like a massive mismatch here. Taking a look at the odds, Jackson is going to be the minus 650 favorite, and the comeback on Strader is plus 475. And let's take a look at Montel Jackson first. So, Jackson, he's pretty well rounded everywhere, I'd say. He's got a good body kick, really stiff jab, good straight left. He's got good distance management on the feet, pretty sharp boxing, has a crisp 1-2, and has decent footwork. His grappling is pretty solid too. Supposedly he does have like a wrestling base, and his offensive grappling isn't bad. He's got good timing on his takedowns, good top control, but as we've seen, he does seem to struggle a bit with his defensive grappling, as we've seen in that Ricky Simone fight. But to his credit, though, Simone is a pretty high-level guy in my opinion, and then he did struggle a bit against Johns, but man, Johns is a very smothering type of fighter, and honestly, I think Jackson should have gotten the win there. Johns really wasn't doing anything. He was just holding Jackson for most of the time, and really just won the fight on the control time. But taking a look at Strader here, he's pretty low level in my opinion, still super green. I mean, on the feet, he's primarily just throwing those winging hooks. Really sits down on his shots, so he can generate quite a bit of power on those, but he really loads up on them, and they are a bit telegraphed. Defensively, he does leave his hands down and leaves his chin exposed quite a bit when he's throwing strikes. There's not a lot of tape on him, and so I wasn't able to see too much of his grappling, so I can't really comment on that. And I honestly don't really have much to break down for this fight. Just based off of what I've seen, I think that Jackson should be able to take this. I mean, I think he's the much better fighter on the feet, and I think he's going to be the better wrestler, grappler as well. I can't really speak to the BJJ of Jackson, but the way he locked in that Darce choke on Kelleher was pretty slick, so I think his BJJ should check out. So I definitely feel that Jackson should be able to win it wherever the fight goes. So unfortunately, not much to break down here. And from a betting standpoint, I don't think this fight's really bettable. I mean, at minus 650, yeah, Jackson should win. But again, this is MMA, and while Strader is pretty low level, Jackson isn't like the highest level guy either. So to lay minus 650 on him is pretty risky. And at the end of the day, this is MMA, and like I said before, Strader does put quite a bit on into his shots. They are a bit loopy and telegraphed, but if he is able to land, there's a good chance he might put Jackson out. But at the end of the day, it is a puncher's chance, and that's pretty much what Strader has here. I think if you really just wanted to play anything, maybe Strader by knockout, but outside of that, I don't even know if any of the other props are going to be playable because, Jackson at minus 650, I think his knockout props or inside the distance props are still going to be pretty juiced. Again, props haven't come out for me yet, but I don't know if I even want to play any of the unders because, we've seen in his fight against Colares, Jackson was willing to just dominate Colares on the ground there and just grind out a decision. So if Jackson decides to play it safe, he could very well just wrestle with Strader and just look to control him for 3 rounds. But if I had to make a pick here, I'd probably say Jackson first round knockout. Strader, he does get a little reckless, and we have seen him knocked out before. So if there is truly a massive difference in skill, then there's a good chance that Jackson does get the knockout. So I guess in terms of props for this, maybe look for Jackson first round KO. But again, that's probably not going to give you the best value. So I'm probably going to look to avoid this fight unless I can get some good odds on some of the props. But the pick here is going to be Jackson, but most likely we'll be avoiding this from a betting perspective. Roman Dolidze versus Trevin Giles, and pretty interesting matchup, but if I'm being honest, I'm not super excited about this. These are 2 guys that I'm not very high on, and I have a feeling this fight is going to be kind of boring. But taking a look at the odds here, Dolidze is going to be the minus 145 favorite, and the comeback on Giles is plus 125. And let's start with Giles here. So with Giles, he's got good boxing. He's got a quick jab, slick 1-2, and has a decent combination striking as well. He is good at moving his head, keeping it off the center line when he's throwing. Defensively, pretty defensively sound as well. As far as the grappling goes, he does seem to have some good takedowns and entries, but seems to struggle a bit with defensive grappling. We've seen him stuck on his back before and controlled on the ground pretty easily, especially, against Mearshart and guys like, Kraus, who was coming in short notice that fight. His fight IQ is also a bit questionable, and his cardio is also kind of questionable. So lots of red flags here for Giles. But on the other hand, his opponent, Dolidze, he's going to be coming in short notice, and I've got to say, I think he's got pretty questionable cardio as well. And outside of that, Dolidze is pretty low output. He's primarily a counter striker, so that's probably why. He's got a pretty nasty body kick that he likes to throw, but like I said before, he's going to be looking to time that perfect counter. He does have quite a bit of power, so if he's able to connect, it can be pretty devastating. With that being said, though, I think that Dolidze does better work on the ground. He's got decent wrestling, good entries on his takedowns, good top control, and good ground and pound. And, supposedly he's got solid BJJ as well. I hear a lot of it circulating that, he's really accredited, has won some tournaments and stuff, but haven't really found anything on that. And, he does have a number of submission wins on his record, but they're against pretty low-level guys. So I'm not really sure just how high level his BJJ is, but he definitely seems competent there, but I don't really think he's like elite or anything. And just taking a look at this matchup, I have a feeling, like I said before, it's going to be a pretty low-paced, pretty boring fight. Again, Dolidze, he's more of a counter-striker, so it's going to be tough getting him to throw. Giles, while his boxing is good, he doesn't have like crazy high volume, and against a counter striker like Dolidze, I don't think that Giles is going to be throwing too much. He's probably going to play it a bit safe, look to maybe land a few kicks, pump the jab out a bit, not look to overcommit on any of his shots because he doesn't want to get put out by Dolidze here. So yeah, I have a feeling this is going to be pretty low output. Both guys probably staring at each other for extended periods, maybe throwing a few kicks out there to stay busy, but on the feet, I really don't see much going on here. And then I think that Dolidze might try and work in a takedown, try and get a bit of control time on Giles, who has shown a bit of deficiency there in terms of his defensive grappling. But at the end of the day, I think that on the feet, it's going to be pretty close. It's going to be hard to judge it either way. I think what it'll come down to is who's able to get a bit of control time. Giles, he has shown some good offensive wrestling, so I guess whoever is able to get off the wrestling game plan a little more effectively is going to be able to steal the round. And like I said before, both guys have pretty questionable cardio, so I think by the time, the second round or, the third round rolls around, both guys are going to be, huffing and puffing in there. They're going to look pretty fatigued, especially if there is grappling going on. But, if I had to make a pick here, I'm going to lean more towards Giles. He's the one who I think should have the full camp here, whereas Dolidze is coming in short notice. And, I think he's going to be the slightly busier fighter on the feet. I think that he might be a bit quicker too. So there's a good chance that maybe Giles is able to beat Dolidze to the punch. And, I think his footwork is a little bit better. So on the feet, I guess I favor Giles a little bit more. But he might be a little tentative, with the counter punching of Dolidze. And the wrestling of Dolidze could very well just kind of steal him the round. So tough fight, but if I had to pick a side, I'm going to go with Giles here. And from a betting perspective, I think that it's got to be Giles or pass, in my opinion. Even though, I can't really trust the defensive grappling of Giles, but I also can't really trust the offensive output of Dolidze. So this is a tough fight to call, and most likely a pass for me from a betting perspective. But if I had to make a pick, I'll lean towards Giles, but not very confident at all. Leonardo Santos versus Grant Dawson, and a really interesting matchup here. I definitely think that Santos is one of the bigger what-ifs in the UFC. He was on a really solid run and probably could have gone somewhere in the UFC if it wasn't for those long layoffs. But taking a look at the betting line here, Dawson is going to be the minus 200 favorite, and the comeback on Santos is plus 170. And let's take a look at Dawson here first. Taking a look at his stand-up, I think it's a little questionable. His offense isn't that great, and defensively, he keeps his hands up and, has decent head movement, but still seems to struggle quite a bit against strikers. Like, he was really struggling with the jab of Trezano and was definitely getting tagged up by Erosa in that fight. However, he does have really good grappling, and that seems to be what bails him out in most of these fights. He's got pretty good entries on his takedowns, good back takes, good transitions, and uses weight really well to secure the takedowns. On the ground, he has some good ground and pound and some pretty good offensive BJJ as well. And in his fight against Derek Mineret, he did show some good submission defense. He stayed really calm that first round and then came out in that second round and was able to get the submission on Minner. Definitely do think that Dawson has some potential in this division. The only issue I see with him so far is his striking isn't really up to par with his grappling. He doesn't really seem comfortable on the feet, and against a good striker who can keep a fight standing, he'll be in a lot of trouble. So yeah, he has to shore up his striking defense a little bit, but as of right now, his grappling has been able to carry him. And taking a look at his opponent, Leonardo Santos, he seems to have a really well-rounded game. The only issue is the long layoffs for him, and right now his age. He's going to be 41 going into this matchup, and, that's a major, major red flag. But outside of that, he seems to have pretty good striking. He's got, a quick jab, 1-2 down the middle. He's got very heavy body kicks as well, and a super dangerous right hand. And then he's also got elite BJJ. I'd say he's probably one of the top guys, in the UFC when it comes to the BJJ. So overall, I'd say he's a pretty complete fighter, but once again, the concern is the age. At 41 at lightweight, that's really old, and the cardio is definitely going to be an issue going into this fight, especially that last fight against Roman Bogatov. I think that kind of speaks volumes for where he is right now. Like in that fight, looked like he started to tire quite a bit in that first round after that first grappling exchange. He didn't completely gas himself out, but he did look noticeably tired and was, slowing down a little bit. And then in that second round, I think he punched himself out a little bit as well, because by that third round, he was just completely gassed. And, he was definitely milking that nut shot. I think he used up the full 5 minutes to rest up. So basically, I'm just kind of put off by his age and his potential cardio issues now. But, if this was Santos maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't hesitate taking him. But now it's just, I can't really trust his gas tank. But taking a look at this matchup, I think this is still going to be a tough fight for Dawson here. Like I said before, Dawson's stand up is still a bit lackluster, and against someone like Santos, who is very dangerous on the feet, I think that Santos could potentially be live for a knockout if Dawson isn't able to get the fight to the ground. But that also brings up the issue of Santos's BJJ, where if Dawson is taking the fight to the ground, he's essentially playing right into Santos's biggest strength. So this puts Dawson in a really tough spot. But like I said before, the cardio is definitely an issue for Santos. And if Dawson is able to kind of wear Santos down that first round, stay safe, I think that there's a good chance that Dawson will likely get the victory, win a decision here, because I don't think Santos will have enough in the tank to land that knockout shot or get the submission later, as I think he'll likely be a bit too tired for that. With all that said, I do think that Santos is still dangerous. I think that if you do want to play him, though, maybe Santos first round finish if you want a really juicy prop, or maybe just look for Santos inside the distance. I honestly just think that that first round is when Santos will be most dangerous, when he'll have the most energy, the most pop in his shots, when they're both dry, when if Dawson takes him down, he'll have the biggest chance of getting that submission. Outside of that first round, I think it's a little unlikely for him, as again, he'll be probably a bit gassed. And going into that second and third round, I guess he if he's conserving his energy a bit, he might still be able to get that knockout shot, but I think the odds for that dramatically worsen. But if I had to make a pick here, I am going to have to go with Dawson. I think that if he's able to get a takedown early in that first round, fend off the submission attempts, I think he'll be able to grind out the decision win here. But yeah, I'm really interested to see how this fight plays out. But yeah, if I had to make a pick, very low confidence pick on Dawson here. I definitely do think that Santos is dangerous, but from a betting perspective, I might just play a little bit on Santos inside the distance, and then maybe put a little bit more on Santos by first round finish. Macy Chiasson versus Marion Reneau, and I don't know how I quite feel about this fight, because on one hand we have Reneau, who I don't think has ever really had an exciting fight, and then Chiasson, who usually does bring it in her fight. So I'm leaning more towards Chiasson being the aggressor here, and hopefully bringing the fight to Reneau and putting on a good show here. But taking a look at the betting lines here, Chiasson is the minus 194 favorite, and the comeback on Reneau is plus 169. And I'm pretty sure this fight was rebooked, and I think the lines were actually a bit wider the first time around, but I'm not sure. I can't say for certain. But yeah, let's take a look at Reneau first. And like I said before, man, she's just such a boring fighter to watch. And honestly, I hope she loses this fight and gets cut, so I don't ever have to watch tape on her ever again. Because, yeah, just super boring fights. And, honestly, I didn't do too much tape to begin with, since I couldn't really stand just sitting through that many of her fights. So, not too in-depth of a breakdown here, but, with Reneau, pretty basic striking on the feet, mainly throws 1-2s, but will occasionally throw 4 or 5 punch combos. She's also had a bit of success in the clinch as well, and if you look at her past few fights, she's been on a bit of a skid. But if you look at some of the fighters she's against, got matched up with, Raquel Pennington and Yana Kunitskaya, who are pretty aggressive clinch fighters themselves. So she obviously struggled with the much younger fighters, and then Kat Zingano basically just got taken down and controlled most of that fight. Chiasson, on the other hand, pretty exciting fighter, if I'm going to be honest. Really aggressive with her striking, likes to move forward, likes to wing those bombs, but she also does have a decent clinch game. She's got some, a good knee up the middle, good clinch knees. However, her striking does look a little bit loopy and slow and a little sloppy, but, it might just seem a little exaggerated because of her length. Defensively, though, she does leave a bit to be desired, like we saw in that Shanna Young fight. I mean, they were just exchanging in the pocket, and Chiasson was just getting beat up there. But she was also throwing quite a bit at Young also, but the fact that she was getting tagged that much, not a very good look. So yeah, on the feet, I mean, I do give her a bit of an advantage. It's just she's a bit wild and a little reckless. So I wouldn't really recommend laying, minus 194 on her because, she's facing a vet in Reneau who, I don't see too many paths to victory for Reneau, but, Reneau has never been finished, and if Chiasson is just moving forward and being aggressive and not being conservative with her gas tank, there is a chance that, she might punch herself out in that first round and, leave the second and third rounds open for Reneau to maybe just grind her out and just outmuscle her for the second and third rounds. I also don't think that, Chiasson is going to be able to blow Reneau out of the water in that first round. Reneau is decent defensively, and if Chiasson is getting a bit careless and reckless, I do see Reneau being able to land on Chiasson as well. And Reneau does seem to have a bit of power for the division, so, I don't think Chiasson can get too reckless here because she could end up getting put out by Reneau, as crazy as that sounds. So for Reneau to win, I think she'll likely have to look to, push Chiasson up against the cage, look to grind it out, make it a really just grindy fight. Maybe even look to take her to the ground and really just test her grappling there because we haven't really seen too much from the grappling of Chiasson. And for Chiasson to have success, I think Chiasson will either have to, keep her distance, look to pick at her at distance, really use her length advantage. Don't get too wild in the exchanges. Stay defensively sound, and then maybe even look to clinch up with Reneau and land a few knees of her own. But as far as a pick goes, I guess I'm going to have to go towards Chiasson. She's the younger fighter, bit more upside, even though, she's still a bit green, only 7 fights so far. Not a very confident pick, and from a betting perspective, I definitely think this is a dog or pass situation. I just think that Chiasson, while she has looked decent in her last few fights, she's just still a bit unproven, and still has a lot of work to do defensively on the feet and in the grappling department as well. However, I just really struggle to see a very clear path to victory for Reneau. I think for her to win, again, Reneau will have to make this a very grindy fight. And knowing her, she definitely can do that. But, at 43 for Reneau, it's just really hard for me to want to bet on her, let alone pick her. So I'm going to have to go with Chiasson here, and I'm not going to touch this fight at all from a betting perspective. Cheyanne, Bays versus Montserrat Ruiz. And this is a short notice fight. Ruiz is coming in on short notice here. She's going to be the plus 285 underdog, and Bays is going to be the minus 360 favorite. And I was just about to pull the trigger on Bays over Hansen because I had a feeling that Hansen was going to get fucked up in that fight. And honestly, I think that Bays should be able to beat up Ruiz pretty badly here, but where the line stands right now, it's just way too risky in my opinion. But taking a look at Ruiz first, so on the feet, I mean, she doesn't seem that good. She is a bit plotty, is kind of inactive on the feet. Does seem to throw with a bit of power though, but at the end of the day, I don't think her striking is that good. She's a bit slow, and we saw in her fight against Danielle Taylor, she wasn't doing jack shit, and really wasn't able to get any of her offense going. It does look like she relies on getting the fight to the ground where she is able to lay the ground and pound and work in the submissions. But from what I've seen, her BJJ isn't great. I mean, she did get a submission win in her last fight, but Miranda just didn't look like she wanted to be there, and that was like the softest tap ever. So I'm not really sold on the BJJ of Ruiz just yet. And as far as her wrestling goes, it does look like she really likes to use that head and arm throw, and she even went for an ankle pick, I think, in one of her fights. But ultimately, I just feel like her takedown entries are a bit slow and are a bit telegraphed, and it looks like she relies a bit on her physicality to get her opponents to the ground. And taking a look at her opponent, Cheyanne Bays, so she's got decent head movement and footwork, likes to throw hooks, specifically that like counter lead hook that she really likes to throw, has a good front body kick, and she throws with quite a bit of power as well. She's not super layered with her striking, but does seem to do the fundamentals pretty well, and it looks like her boxing has really improved in her last few fights. Like in her fight against Rebecca Adney, She looked a bit clunky and stiff, but in her fight against Rose, it looks like her hands were a bit quicker and her boxing looked a bit sharper. I mean, it might just be because Rose might be more of a grappler, and Adney might have been a slightly better striker, even though Adney was 0-2 at the time. So not really good wins, but from what I've seen, it does look like Baez is making some improvements. Her takedown defense did seem pretty good. She was stuffing a number of takedown attempts from Rose. Was really good at sprawling and digging those underhooks. However, we haven't really seen too much out of her BJJ. But taking a look at this matchup, I just think that Baez just has Ruiz completely outgunned on the feet. I think that, standing, Baez should be able to touch up Ruiz pretty badly here. Ruiz is a bit wild with her striking. I mean, she does have decent head movement and does keep her guard high, but her striking is very loopy, and she does, again, get pretty wild with her striking. I think Baez should be able to touch her up. The only issue with this fight is the line is way too wide. Baez still kind of green. Yeah, she is 5-1, and she has accumulated quite a number of fights on her amateur stint, but her pro career has, still pretty short, and we did see Ruiz go for like an ankle pick when she was desperate, and Ruiz is a pretty big girl, pretty strong, so if she is able to get a takedown on Baez and just get some control time, work in that submission, it could get a bit dicey, and at minus 360, it's just way too wide, way too risky for me to want to put anything down on Baez. But as far as a pick goes, I'm going to go with Baez here. I think she's going to be able to get it done on the feet. She's going to be able to beat Ruiz pretty badly, in my opinion. But at this wide of a line, I can't trust Ruiz or Baez to consistently keep the fight standing. It's just too risky at the end of the day. So pick is Baez, but no bet here. Song Kenan versus Max Griffin, and Max Griffin's going to be the minus 163 favorite here, and the comeback on Song is plus 143. And let's start with Griffin. So, taking a look at what he does well, he's got a good high guard. He has a decent counter that he throws, but offensively, his striking is pretty basic. He'll throw a jab, maybe a 1-2 or a hook, but not much combination striking from him, and he's not really setting anything up either. It does seem like he has a bit of power as well. I mean, I've seen him drop and knock guys down in a number of his fights, but he just can't really seem to get the finish on them. He will mix in the takedowns occasionally as well, but his top control isn't that great. More often than not, his opponents are able to get up when he starts to posture up on them. So his takedowns are there and may be a factor in this fight, but I don't think he's able to usually do much with it. So more often than not, his opponents are able to just get back onto their feet. And taking a look at his opponent, Song here, not much to say. I mean, I don't think he's a very high-level striker as well. I think both of these guys are honestly pretty low level. But, as far as what Song does well on the feet, he does seem to have quite a bit of pop in his shots. I mean, he does load up on it quite a bit, though. And so it is quite a bit telegraphed. And, defensively, he's not that good. He keeps his hands down and is pretty hittable himself. However, the power that he does generate when he does connect, it makes him a pretty dangerous fighter. But the thing is, with Song, he is a bit reliant on that knockout and really just connecting with the power shots. He struggles a lot with guys who have good footwork and are good at managing distance, or just generally are good, defensive boxers. So yeah, overall his, offensive striking, bit of power, but not very technical. As far as his grappling goes, though, I haven't seen too much offensively, but defensively his grappling isn't too good either. I've seen him taken down on numerous occasions, pretty easily too. However, he does work his way back up pretty well in most of those fights, but overall I'd say his defensive grappling isn't that good. But taking a look at this matchup, I mean, it's kind of a tough one to call. I don't think either guys are really that good on the feet, so I see this being, playing out pretty closely on the feet. I do give a bit of an advantage to Griffin here. He is going to be the bigger guy. I think he's got a decent reach advantage, and I do see Song potentially having some trouble closing the distance. Griffin also is decent defensively, and his footwork isn't bad. So if Griffin is able to stay light on his feet, he could probably just pump the jab, work the 1-2, and just kind of pick at Song. I think for Song to have any success, he'll have to make things kind of dirty, look to trade in the pocket, maybe look to brawl a bit, really just look to force some exchanges, get a little wild in there, and maybe look to catch Griffin in some of those exchanges. However, I do favor Griffin a bit more on the feet, just because I think he is a bit more technically sound. I mean, I know you can't really do MMA math, but both of these guys have fought Alex Morono, and Song just did not have any success in that fight at all. Morono was really just able to kind of dance around Song, avoid a lot of his power shots, and was able to just touch him up. Whereas with Griffin, at least he was having a bit more success against Morono and was actually pretty competitive most of that fight. So yeah, I think I'm gonna slightly lean Griffin here. I think that if he is able to maintain the distance, he can have a good amount of success. But I think that if Song is able to crash the pocket, make things a little brawly, he think he could very likely pull away in some of those exchanges. But at the end of the day, I'm not really high on either fighters and don't really want to put money on either guy, as I'm not really confident in their abilities. So if I had to make a pick here, I'm going to go with Griffin. But from a betting perspective, I think the value is going to be a bit more on Song. I think Griffin really should realistically only be like minus 130 or so. So again, pick is Griffin and likely no bet here. Adrian Yanez versus Gustavo Lopez, and this should be a pretty fun fight for as long as it lasts. And taking a look at the odds here, Yanez is going to be the minus 200 favorite, and the comeback on Lopez is plus 170. And let's take a look at Yanez first. So, he's primarily a striker. He likes to pressure his opponents. Will throw combinations, when he has them backed up. But he does look like he gets a little wild when he's throwing those combinations. However, it does look like he has gotten a bit more measured lately. Very good with the straight shots, picking his shots, finding the openings. Defensively, he's good. Keeps his hands up, good at blocking shots and moving his head out of the center line. However, the only concern I do have with him is occasionally when he's throwing some of those combos, he does leave himself open a little bit. But I think that his durability kind of bails him out a bit in those situations. I did see him eat like a pretty clean, kick to the face and was able to eat that like nothing. So from what I've seen so far, it looks like his durability checks out. Although I don't think he's, really fought anyone with like, massive power or anything. And outside of that Miles Johns fight, I haven't really seen his, grappling tested that much. And supposedly he has worked on it quite a bit. At least in recent fights, it seems he's a little more cognizant about getting off of the fence when he's getting pressed there. Yanez also showed some pretty good counter-striking in his last two fights, but do have to consider the fact that he was going up against some pretty low-level opponents in Victor Rodriguez and Brady Wong. Pretty low-level guys there. Was able to get them out of there early in that first round. However, the striking does seem to check out. He has pretty quick hands, pretty accurate, and is aggressive on the feet too. But taking a look at his opponent, Gustavo Lopez, he's pretty aggressive as well. I mean, he's kind of light on the feet, likes to kind of just dart in and out of the pocket. He's got pretty good pretty quick hands, has a good jab and a good counter as well, and does seem to put quite a bit of heat on his shots. He's also got a good leg kick and does seem to go to his wrestling a bit, although his top control isn't great. His UFC debut was a short notice fight against Merab Dvalishvili where, he was basically just taken down a number of times in that fight. Did show, a few moments in that fight on the feet where, he did have a few moments. But overall, Merab just really just kind of had his way there. And, you can't really take that much from that fight. I mean, Dvalishvili, he's a total monster when it comes to the takedowns and the wrestling. And, it was a short notice fight for Lopez. But, in his second fight in the UFC, he did get matched up with Birchak, where, again, he was just kind of popping in and out of the pocket, was able to catch Birchak clean with a counter left hook, I think. I believe he actually landed it twice, but was able to eventually get Birchak down and submit him with a rear naked choke. But taking a look at this matchup, I think I am going to have to favor Yanez a little more. On the feet, I think he's got slightly crisper boxing, and he's got a pretty significant reach advantage here. Well, I guess a decent reach advantage. 67-inch for Lopez and 70 for Yanez, so actually a slight reach advantage, and he will have the height advantage as well. I also think his boxing is a little bit crisper, but I do give Lopez the advantage when it comes to the counter striking. I think for Lopez to have success in this fight, he'll have to kick at the legs of Yanez a bit. Lopez does have some pretty heavy kicks. Maybe also look to counter Yanez as he's coming in. He'll likely also have to mix in some of the wrestling as well to, get a little bit of top control and hopefully look to win some minutes and maybe some rounds. But purely from a striking perspective, I'm going to have to favor Yanez a bit. I think Gustavo's really going to have to mix it up quite a bit for him to win. So as far as the pick goes, I'm going to pick Yanez. I think that he will have the advantage on the feet. And, Lopez has actually been finished a number of times. So his chin is a little bit suspect. But that being said, though, he has faced, UFC level competition. So, from a pure pick perspective, I'm going to go with Yanez. But I don't think I'm going to bet on this fight. I think that Yanez still is a little unproven. He's fought relatively low-level competition, where, again, with Lopez, he has fought some UFC caliber opponents, albeit, they were losses. So, yeah, going to pick Yanez here just because I see that, for Lopez to win, he's going to have to do a lot more to get the victory. Whereas for Yanez, I think that if he keeps it standing, he'll likely have a very good chance of winning a decision or even knocking Lopez out. So pick is Yanez, but likely will be avoiding this from a betting perspective. Tai Tuivasa versus Don'Tale Mayes, and Tuivasa is going to be the minus 250 favorite here, and they come back on Mayes is plus 210. And this is a pretty interesting matchup between two low-level heavyweights. Honestly, I'm not super excited about this. I have a feeling it's going to be a pretty sloppy fight. But taking a look at Tuivasa first, he has good boxing, at least for a heavyweight. He's got good combination striking, and, he does have a good low kick that he throws. And it does look like he puts quite a bit on his shots. He does land some pretty heavy shots. He's a bit hittable, though. Not super good defense. And what I've seen him do a lot is he will tie his opponents up. Although he's not super busy there, I don't think he's really using that position to really score points or anything. I think most of the time he is just doing it to weigh on his opponents a little bit, kind of tire them out, and at the same time rest up a little bit because his gas tank isn't great. So he does use his size a bit to clinch up and, likely stall the fight a little bit. He's not super busy there. Like I said, he's just trying to stall, I feel. Tuivasa also doesn't really seem to have much offensive grappling. His defensive grappling is a bit, questionable as well. But if you look at the opponents that he's really struggled against, Sergey Spivak and Lego Ivanov, pretty high-level guys in my opinion. Especially Spivak, whose whole game is really just to grind on you. And so you can't really hold that against him too much. But for the sake of this matchup, I don't think it's really going to matter either. I think both of these guys are primarily strikers. Neither of these guys have really, any sort of grappling game. But moving on to Don'Tale Mayes. So, like I said before, he is primarily a striker. He's got decent footwork. He's got a good jab, a good front and, leg kick that he uses. He is a bit hittable as well, too, which is why I think this fight might get a little sloppy because we'll have two guys who are primarily strikers, probably just going back and forth, probably a rock'em sock'em robots type of deal here. And like I said before, not much grappling from Mayes here. I don't think I've seen him hit an offensive takedown. And defensively, his BJJ seems to be really suspect. He's got, his two most recent losses are from submission. And, he did have a heel hook loss to Cyril Gane, which honestly doesn't look really good. A lot of people look at that fight and they'll kind of give Gane a lot of credit saying, he's really developed his BJJ game. But I honestly just think that Mayes is just terrible with his BJJ. He just lacks awareness there. And, good on Gane being able to lock that up. But I think people really should be shitting on Mayes a little more. And Nascimento saw the tape there and just attacked the choke second round and was able to get him out of there. But again, I don't think that Tuivasa is really going to be looking to take this fight to the ground. I don't think Tuivasa's got, he's not a BJJ ace or anything. And I don't know if he's going to want to waste his energy trying to go for a submission if, that's not really where his strong suit is. But taking a look at this matchup, like I said before, primarily a striking affair. So for that reason, I don't see why the line is this wide. I guess Tuivasa, he's a bit quicker. He's fought higher level competition, but I definitely don't see why he should be the minus 250 favorite here. Maybe I'm completely wrong here, and Tuivasa just puts on an absolute clinic. and just is able to get Mays out of there. But honestly, I don't see that happening. I think more than likely it is going to be a pretty back and forth fight. In fact, I think the length of Mays might actually give Tuivasa some trouble. I mean, he'll have decent reach advantage. So let's see here. He's got an 81-inch reach, and Tuivasa's got a 75-inch reach. So good, like 6-inch reach advantage, and then he's also got a 4-inch height advantage. So I think Tuivasa might struggle a bit closing the distance. And like I said before, Mays doesn't have terrible footwork. I think if he's able to stick to the outside, work the jab, work his front body kicks, work the leg kicks, I think he could definitely, just outpoint Tuivasa on the feet. I think for Tuivasa to have success, he'll have to, box in the pocket, look for some exchanges, maybe make it a bit of a brawl, and try to hold Mays up against the fence, land some of those clinch strikes. Maybe just weigh down on him a bit, but I don't think it's going to be a very lopsided fight. Definitely not like the line should indicate here. So, I'm going to have to go with. I'm going to pick Mays here. I think Mays could win a decision. But again, this is pretty low level, so I'm not going to bet too much on this. But from a betting perspective, I might just put like a quarter of a unit on Mays by decision, because if he is to win this, I think his most likely path to victory is to just outpoint Tuivasa. I don't see him getting the sub here. And the knockout is on the table, but Tuivasa is pretty durable, and Mays hasn't really been knocking anyone out on the UFC at the UFC level. But as far as the pick goes, I'm going to have to go with Mays. And as soon as some of these props open up, I'm going to probably put a little bit on Mays by decision. Brad Riddell versus Gregor Gillespie, and this is a pretty interesting grappler versus striker matchup, with Gregor being the grappler and Riddell being the striker primarily. So taking a look at these odds here, Gillespie is going to be the minus 205 favorite, and the comeback on Riddell is plus 175. And let's take a look at Gillespie first here, actually. So we know Gillespie, he's primarily a wrestler. As far as what he does well on the feet, I mean, we haven't really seen too much of it. He's got a good tight high guard that he has, does have a decent jab, but outside of that, I haven't really seen too much from him on the feet, because a lot of the time he's just going to be shooting for that single or double leg right away. On the ground, he has pretty good top pressure. He's good at tying the legs together, kind of like how Khabib does it. And, he's got really good top control and good transitions. But really, I think what sets him apart is just how relentless he is with his takedowns. If he isn't able to get his opponent down the first time, he doesn't just give up. He will continue to attack that single leg or that double leg. He'll also maybe look to take the back and kind of just put his weight on you. And on top of that, it does look like his cardio checks out. His wrestling, he is able to carry his wrestling on late into the second round. We haven't really seen him go into that third round, but from what I've seen so far, he does, seem to be able to put on quite a pace, at least through 2 rounds. And taking a look at Riddell here, obviously, he's going to be the striker in this matchup. He's got pretty good striking. He's got good offensive and defensive striking. He's got good counterpunching, but is also good when he's initiating as well. He's really accurate, but does tend to wind up a bit on some of his shots. Although, he does have pretty good power. He sits down on his shots a good amount. Doesn't throw a ton of volume, but is good at, just making reads and adjustments and finding openings. His grappling doesn't look too bad either. We did see him hit some offensive takedowns on Alex de Silva, and his takedown defense isn't terrible either. He was able to fend off the takedowns of Mustafayev pretty well. There were some moments where Mustafayev was, just hanging off of his back, but, he wasn't able to get too much done there. And I think Riddell actually did a pretty good job of, keeping Mustafayev from, gaining top control or having any dominant positions. That said, though, Mustafayev isn't really the pressure wrestler that Gillespie is. Mustafayev was really just content to get a bit of control time, just hanging off of Riddell. But if Gillespie was in the same situation, he would probably look to maybe get a trip or a sweep to finish the takedown. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, while Riddell has had a bit of success against, wrestlers, I don't think he's really faced a type of wrestler that, Gillespie is. We haven't really seen Riddell spend too much time on his back and really fend off, multiple takedowns, someone who's chaining takedowns on him. So this is a very interesting matchup. I'm very interested to see, if Gillespie is going to be putting on the same pace that he was, in some of his previous fights. And that actually brings up one of the concerns I have for this fight for Gillespie. I mean, I like Gillespie in this matchup. It's just that it's been nearly like 2 years since we've seen a really dominant, grappling performance from Gillespie. Because, he did fight. The last fight that he had was against Kevin Lee back in 2019, late 2019. And he did get knocked out there, but he didn't really go to his wrestling at all in that fight. I mean, he did try and go for the single leg, I think once or twice, but didn't really have any success there and was just content to stand and trade with Kevin Lee, and eventually led to him getting knocked out. But prior to that, he had a fight against Yancy Medeiros back in early 2019. So it'll be, nearly 2 years since we've seen him have a dominant grappling performance. And, he is getting a bit older. He's 33 now and will be coming off of about a year and a half layoff. And personally, it is a bit concerning for me to pick wrestlers as they start to age, because the wrestling really just does a number on your cardio. And as you start to age, the cardio is the first thing to go. And, at 33, he's borderline at that age where, the cardio starts to fade and, the athleticism starts to decline a bit. And, if that starts to go for Gillespie, that's gonna be trouble for him, because he's primarily a wrestler. And, his stand-up isn't terrible, but if he's going to have to resort to keeping it standing, I think he's going to be in a lot of trouble, especially against Riddell, who, if you're going to give him time on the feet, I think he's going to hurt Gillespie, possibly even get the knockout. But assuming that Gillespie's, hasn't fallen off a cliff or anything in regards to his athleticism, I think that he should be able to beat Riddell here. I mean, the wrestling pace and pressure that he puts on, it's going to be tough for Riddell to really get any sort of offense going. The way, Gillespie is able to just hang off of his opponents, use his weight to kind of drag him to the floor. And honestly, his takedowns are really solid too. So, I think that, again, assuming Gillespie hasn't declined too much, he should be able to take and control Riddell for the majority of the first 2 rounds, maybe even work in a submission. But overall, I do see Gillespie winning here. So the pick here is going to be Gillespie. However, the line right now just seems a little wide at minus 200. If this was like a prime Gillespie, I think I'd take him. But right now, the time off is a bit of a concern. And then the age is a slight concern as well. So small red flags here. I do think Gillespie should be able to take it. But, if he isn't able to take Riddell down, there is a chance that he might gas and possibly get knocked out. But, I think that assuming, once again, he is in good shape, he should be able to take Riddell down, maybe submit him, work some ground and pound. I'd say he can probably put on a pretty dominant performance for 2 rounds and then maybe survive that 3rd round. So the pick here is going to be Gillespie, and no bet on the money line just yet. Maybe if the line, closes up a little bit more, if I can get like maybe minus 160 or so on Gillespie, I might pull the trigger on him. Something I am looking at, though, is possibly round 2 or round 3 submission for Gillespie. I think that first round is going to be pretty grindy. I don't think Gillespie will be able to get much done because Riddell, both guys will be at full energy to start the fight. He'll be defending the takedowns pretty well, defending the submissions pretty well. But, I think the gas tank of Riddell is, I don't think it's bad, but he paces himself pretty well, and he's never really been pushed. So, against someone like Gillespie, who's able to push a pretty crazy wrestling pace, I think that there's a good chance that Riddell will tire quite a bit after that first round. And I see a potential submission for Gillespie, assuming, again, if Gillespie isn't just completely, hasn't fallen off a complete cliff these past year and a half. I see him potentially getting a submission later in the fight. But yeah, that'll be my pick for this fight, and looking to possibly play some of the props here. Main event time: Kevin Holland versus Derek Brunson, and Holland's going to be the minus 170 favorite, and the comeback on Brunson is going to be plus 145. And let's start with Kevin Holland, who's had a pretty fantastic 2020. He's on a 5-fight win streak and is on the verge of being completely overhyped. I think that if he has a good performance against Brunson here, he definitely will be overvalued in his next fight. It wasn't too long ago that people were just questioning his fight IQ because of his fights against Mearshart and Brendan Allen. But I'm sure some people are still very wary of laying massive chalk on Kevin Holland because of that, but he definitely has looked very good recently. And if he gets a win here against Brunson, I think a lot of people are going to start forgetting about those performances, and I think a lot of the casual money is going to start coming in on him. But let's not jump the gun here. Let's take a look at what Kevin Holland does well, though. So from a striking standpoint, he's got phenomenal striking. He's really creative with the strikes. I did see him throw like a jab and a hammer fist, which very interesting, but not sure how effective that is. Definitely really cool though. He mixes it up very well on the feet. We'll throw a number of combinations. Is good at working the body, kicking the legs, and he'll throw in a number of kicks in there as well. He's also got really good accuracy, a great jab, great 1-2, very dangerous straight right. While I don't think that Holland is super powerful or explosive, I think his timing and accuracy really make up for that. And I also think he uses his length pretty well to generate some momentum and power in his shots. But I just don't really consider him as a power puncher or anything. Defensively, he's pretty good. He's good at rolling with the shots, slipping, and countering as well. He's got really good boxing in the pocket. Honestly, he's good at moving forward and fighting off his back foot as well. So overall, I'd say he's a level or so above Brunson here, and just overall is a really good striker. However, I think we all kind of know this. The biggest concern with Holland is his takedown defense and his cardio, which they kind of go hand in hand. His takedown defense isn't actually too bad. I think he's got good scrambling and decent get-ups. It's just that when he starts to get tired, it becomes very easy to take him down, and he doesn't really have the cardio or gas tank to continuously work himself back up to his feet. And to kind of make things worse, he does have questionable decision making. Sometimes, like in his fight against Allen and Mearshart, he continuously decided to keep the fight on the ground even when he had opportunities to stand it up, where I think he had a pretty clear advantage. I think the issue with Holland is that aside from the cardio, he does get a little comfortable, fighting off his back, because he is pretty dangerous off his back, as we've seen in that Souza fight where he was able to knock Souza out on his back, but you can't really count on that consistently. And if you're happy to spend most of your time on your back, throwing elbows, throwing punches, you can do a bit of damage, but at the same time you're giving up, a dominant position, and it doesn't really look good on the judge's point of view. But yeah, overall the defensive grappling is really the biggest concern, especially in this matchup against Brunson, who is a really good wrestler. But yeah, taking a look at Brunson, he's rounded out his game really well. His base is obviously in wrestling, but he mixes in his boxing in there really well. I mean, he's not a super technical boxer or anything, but what he does well is he is able to mix up his level changes and boxing really well, in the sense that a lot of fighters, when they start to anticipate the takedown, they'll drop their hands, get ready to get those underhooks in. But that's when Brunson will switch it up on them, look to land like power overhands, and he's just so good at keeping his opponents guessing, keeping his opponents on their feet, and just being a bit unpredictable in that sense. Just mixing up his wrestling and his boxing to take advantage of any holes in his opponents' defense. Like, we kind of saw that in the Shabazian fight, where Shabazian, he was starting to cover up. He kept his guard up because Brunson was starting to land some of those power shots, those power overhands, and what Brunson decided to do was just work the level change, get Shabazian to the ground. I mean, Shabazian was able to work his way back up, but the next time Brunson started to back him up, Shabazian started to drop his hands a bit in anticipation of the takedown. But instead of going for the takedown, he just started winging hooks on Shabazian and landed quite a few clean shots on him. And essentially that's what makes Brunson so dangerous, because you either have to defend the takedown or you're defending those power shots from him. And I know that's a bit of an oversimplification of it, but the dynamic that Brunson is able to bring to fights is I think what gives him so much success in a lot of his fights. I think to beat Brunson, you'd have to be able to outclass him on the feet. I mean, if you take a look at some of the guys that he's lost to, all pretty much elite strikers, and Souza, who has some pretty crazy power and, honestly might just have his number. And I think that's why people were so high on Shabazian in that matchup. I think a ton of people just thought that Shabazian would be able to just destroy Brunson on the feet. And, he was having a bit of success with the striking. I think what a lot of people didn't really factor in there was just how bad Shabazian's gas tank was. But going back to this matchup, I definitely do feel that Holland is dangerous enough on the feet to give Brunson a lot of trouble and possibly be able to knock him out. However, I don't think that Holland will completely blow Brunson out of the water here on the feet. I think that he will have moments and overall will come out ahead if it does stay standing. But I do think that, Brunson will have a few moments in there. I think Brunson will have a lot more success when he is able to start landing a few takedowns, have Holland really start to question what Brunson is planning to do. However, I'm just not sure if Brunson really has the cardio to go 5 rounds and implement a grapple-heavy game plan for that long. Neither guys have great cardio, but in a lot of Holland's fights, he's just been coming in short notice. I mean, I'm sure he's been staying active, but for this fight, he'll be in a full camp for once, I believe. So I think coming into this fight, Holland will have a good gas tank. I mean, it won't be anything crazy, but I think he'll be much more prepared than in a lot of his fights. And I think his conditioning will definitely be on point coming into this. And it doesn't look like either of these guys have been in 5-round fights in the UFC. So this is a very, very interesting matchup in that sense. But as far as a pick goes for this fight, I'm going to have to go with Holland here. I think that he's the more dangerous fighter on the feet. I think he's more technical. I think he's quicker. I think that Holland's got the KO upside in this matchup. However, I do think that the wrestling of Brunson will close the gap on this fight a bit more. The only thing is, I'm not sure if Brunson will be able to continuously secure takedowns. I think for Brunson to win, he'll have to secure enough control time for at least 3 rounds, and I just have a hard time envisioning that. And on the ground, I'd say Holland's BJJ is actually pretty sneaky. I mean, I don't think he's gotten too many submission wins on his record, but I actually think that Holland's BJJ is kind of underrated. I actually think Holland by submission isn't out of the realm of possibility here and might actually be a decent prop. The odds for the props haven't come out yet, but I might take a small shot on that, especially considering, if Brunson shoots a very sloppy takedown, Holland could definitely lock in a guillotine. Also, not as likely, but, if Brunson isn't careful when he's transitioning, when he's got top control, he could find himself in a, triangle choke or something. But, I don't think that's too likely, and I'm not even sure if I'll take the shot on it. It'll really depend on what the odds are for that. But as far as this fight goes, again, I'm going to have to go with Holland. I think that he's going to have a pretty clear advantage on the feet, and I think that in a 5-round fight, he'll keep it on the feet long enough to be able to win either on the scorecards or be able to even potentially get a knockout on Brunson. Whereas, I feel for Brunson, for him to win, he'll have to get Holland down consistently for at least 3 rounds and be able to control him for the majority of those rounds. So again, the pick is Holland, but as of right now, I don't have any bets placed. I might be looking at some of the props later. Where it stands right now, minus 170, I think there's not much value on Holland, and I have a feeling this line is going to get steamed as we get closer to fight week and fight day. However, if it looks like money's going to come in on Brunson and I can get Holland at 150, I'm going to hammer that for sure. But yeah, the pick is Holland, and I might look to bet that depending on where the line moves. And that'll conclude another episode of this podcast. Not too many bets locked in at the moment. I have a lot of them that I like and a lot of props that I'm looking at, but man, a lot of these lines have been pretty crazy for this card. Nothing that really jumps out at me. I mean, a lot of these lines are pretty wide, so I'm going to wait for some of these props to come out, and if I do lock anything in, I'll be sure to post it on my Bet MMA Tips page. But yeah, for right now, a lot of fights I'm looking at, going to see where the line moves with some of them, and then maybe dig a little deeper on some of the fights that I do have leaned towards. But at the end of the day, I will post all my picks on Bet MMA Tips. But yeah, let me know what you guys think on some of these fights, whether you think I'm completely off or if you agree or not. But yeah, lots of heavy favorites on this card, and I definitely see a few of these guys potentially shitting the bed. So very interesting card. But yeah, I think that'll do it for this podcast. I appreciate you guys for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time.